Tonight, some North and South Carolina communities still struggling more than a year and a half after Hurricane Matthew slammed our coast. Entire communities were underwater for weeks. Now, both Carolinas received millions of dollars in federal funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development aimed at helping put families back in their homes. But investigative reporter Nick Oxner found progress in one state, while the other has yet to spend any of that federal money.
We're in a 21-foot boat on Main Street. I don't know what we're going to do.
This is what Main Street in Fair Bluff, North Carolina looked like in October 2016, in the days after Hurricane Matthew brought its sweeping floodwaters over the banks of the Lumber River and into homes and businesses. When we visited last September, a year after the storm, Main Street was still a ghost town.
Nobody had ever seen anything like this. Really? Nobody.
We first caught up with Ray Lundy along Main Street last fall.
All of us who are here feel forgotten, and a lot of them, I'm mad because nobody wants to help.
We saw Lundy again when we went back to Fair Bluff this week.
Fair Bluff is exactly like it was in '16 when Hurricane Matthew struck. Nothing has changed except the volume of mold.
It's been about 7 months since we first showed you the boarded up windows of the businesses here on Main Street in Fair Bluff. After our story aired, Governor Roy Cooper pledged millions of additional dollars specifically to help Fair Bluff recover. But more than half a year later, little has changed, and residents here tell me there's still no help in sight. They're all destroyed, empty, everyone's gone.
Gone.
It's a different story in Betty Smith's front yard, just a 30-minute drive down the road in Mullins, South Carolina.
I thank God every day for allowing me to be back in my home, because I ain't no place like home.
Her home was destroyed by Hurricane Matthew, and the state of South Carolina used federal funds from HUD to help move her into a new place of her own.
It's very rough because, I mean, you don't have, people that's really gonna want you to stay with them. And I didn't have the funds, all the money to get in a hotel. Every day I pray, God, please, Lord, help me get back in my home.
When I walk out of here in about 3 years, this whole place is going to have nothing but photographs of walls on it.
Betty Smith's home is on the wall of the South Carolina Disaster Recovery Office. Its director, J.R. Sanderson, says they've already put 52 families affected by Hurricane Matthew back in homes, using money from HUD that was awarded the same time as North Carolina's grant.
South Carolina's moving faster than a lot of other people. Having said that, it's still not fast enough for the citizen. I mean, the citizen wants to be back in their home tomorrow, and my mission, my job, my team's job is to try to make that happen as fast as we possibly can.
By contrast, a report released by HUD at the end of March shows North Carolina has yet to spend a single dollar of its disaster recovery grant money, and rates the state as a, quote, slow spender. At this point, do you think the town can even fully recover? It's been so long. Is there any coming back from what happened now?
No, Nick, unless there's an infusion of money in here. We're frustrated. We would love something done to help this town. But as far as I see, this town is dead.
Reporting in Fair Bluff, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
A WBTV investigation is getting results from leaders in both Raleigh and Washington. We told you last night about hundreds of millions of dollars the federal government gave the state to be used to replace and repair homes damaged by Hurricane Matthew. But that's not happening in North Carolina. Investigative reporter Nick Oxner is in the newsroom with more.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of reaction today to the investigation we first told you about last night when we found that the state of North Carolina has spent a grand total of $0 of a $236 million federal community development block grant that's supposed to be helping victims of people who lost their homes in Hurricane Matthew get back in those homes. Well, we tried to get the governor's office or someone from the North Carolina Office of Emergency Management to sit down in an interview on camera and explain to us why that money had yet to be spent, any of it. Yet to be spent. They refused to do an interview with us over the course of the past week, but today they sent out a tweet saying that it takes time to build houses and they're looking for quality, not necessarily speed. But I'll note that no one from the Office of Emergency Management has yet to answer any of our questions or respond to our request for an interview. At the same time today, we're also hearing reaction from North Carolina U.S. Representative Robert Pittenger, who represents part of the area that was impacted by Hurricane Matthew. He says he was floored to hear that the state of North Carolina has not spent any of these federal dollars.
We need some accountability. we need to understand they need to give an account to the people in these counties of why they had delivered the money. They've done it in South Carolina. We ought to be able to do it here.
Now, coming up Monday afternoon, the North Carolina General Assembly is holding its own hearing to find out why this money hasn't been spent and why the pace of recovery is going so slowly. We'll be in Raleigh. We'll tell you what happens there on Monday. For now, reporting the newsroom, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
State officials on the hot seat in Raleigh. Officials at North Carolina's emergency management faced tough questions about the slow pace of recovery from Hurricane Matthew. Now, many of those questions prompted by a WBTV investigation that found the state has yet to spend any of the $236 million grant meant to put families back in their homes. Our investigative reporter Nick Oxner broke the story. He was in Raleigh for today's hearing.
We've been trying to ask leaders with the State Office of Emergency Management for more than a week why it has taken more than 18 months to even start the process of repairing homes that were damaged in Hurricane Matthew back in October of 2016. Well, state leaders haven't wanted to answer our questions, and today it became apparent they didn't want to answer questions from lawmakers either.
It's almost 2 years. I'm really afraid to go back to my district because, like you, I don't know because I'm starting to lie to them.
Tempers flared today in the North Carolina General Assembly as lawmakers on both sides of the aisle pointedly asked state emergency management leaders what was taking so long to help residents recover from Hurricane Matthew.
This is real life. You have left these people in limbo for 18 months now with no answer. You've left counties, and there's county officials sitting back here with no answer.
Are you satisfied that the pace of recovery efforts in North Carolina are moving as fast as they possibly can?
Absolutely not.
State Representative John Bell lives in Goldsboro, which was hit hard by the storm. He chaired today's hearing.
Today, as you witnessed, not only did those questions not get answered, but when they were drilled down to give us certain specific dates, times, issues, the administration could not do that, and frankly, did not have any answers for the committee today.
Hey, Mr. Burke, Nick Oxner at WBTV. How you doing? And emergency management officials didn't want to answer our questions either. We've been asking for an interview for more than a week with no response. So we caught up with Assistant Emergency Management Director Nick Burke as he left Monday's hearing. Sir, we're wondering why no one will answer our questions. Can you give me a reason for that?
Well, we have provided a lot of information. We continue to through email, and we'll talk to any reporter at your station, any other reporter.
Now, we were actually stopped by a trio of General Assembly police officers as we tried to ask our questions of those emergency management leaders you saw there. We've put more of that video online at WBTV.com. Reporting in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
New at 6 o'clock, a WBTV investigation has uncovered disaster recovery officials making promises to help victims of Hurricane Matthew, but then failing to follow through on their own timelines.
Leaders with the Department of Public Safety refused to answer questions from our investigative reporter Nick Oxner, so he took those questions to the governor. Nick joins us now. So what have you learned, Nick?
Yeah, guys, in mid-April, a representative from North Carolina Emergency Management told lawmakers construction would begin to rebuild homes damaged by Hurricane Matthew by May 1st. But more than a month past that deadline, there still aren't hammers swinging at any of the hundreds of homes just waiting to be fixed.
We're in a 21-foot boat on Main Street. I don't know what we're going to do.
This is what the tiny town of Fair Bluff, North Carolina looked like in the days after Hurricane Matthew pushed feet of water over Main Street. And this is what Main Street looked like a year later, boarded up and abandoned. And still, nothing had changed when we went back just recently. Functionally, nothing's happened to rebuild the homes and businesses damaged by Hurricane Matthew.
The city of Fair Bluff looks pretty much the same today as it did 18 months ago. Empty businesses, empty homes, debris everywhere.
Brendan Jones represents Fair Bluff in the North Carolina State House. He was part of the legislative committee that grilled a representative from North Carolina Emergency Management in April about a timeline from when help would ever arrive.
May 1st, we're working hard with our partners to have the first home repairs underway.
Nick Burke with NCEM said construction paid for with state money would start in May. Reimbursements and construction with federal dollars would continue in June. But a week into June, no construction has started, and the state still hasn't finished the environmental reviews required before the federal money could even be distributed.
Governor, it's been more than a year and a half since Hurricane Matthew devastated eastern North Carolina, yet your administration has yet to spend any state money or federal money rebuilding victims' homes. Why is that?
They need to go faster in making sure that people get individual assistance, either to buy out their home or to reimburse them for the repairs they've made, or to construct homes and elevate them. That needs to go faster. I have been pushing them. I believe that they are on the right track.
Why people whose homes were damaged in hurricanes cannot
talk with another reporter from your station. Thank you.
In April, Burke wouldn't answer our questions. Neither would anyone from the Cooper administration. So we took our questions to the governor at an event in Charlotte.
I'm not going to argue with you that things need to move faster and things need to be pushed forward.
Late last month, a group of 8 U.S. senators and congressmen sent Cooper a letter asking why the state was rated as a slow spender in its hurricane relief efforts, and wanted to know why the state had yet to spend any of the hundreds of millions of dollars in housing relief. Meanwhile, state lawmakers like Brendan Jones say he and his colleagues are waiting to know when help will arrive, just like those in boarded-up towns like Fairbluff.
The governor has just ignored my request, the majority leader's request, time and time again to get help to these people. It's almost like they're non-existent to him.
Now, today, Cooper also committed to having someone from his administration finally sit down with us and answer our questions about hurricane recovery efforts on camera. He wouldn't commit to when that would happen, but we do intend to make sure someone gives us answers. Guys, back to you.
We know you'll stay on it for us. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
New tonight, a WBTV investigation has uncovered more delays in the state's efforts to put thousands of families back into their homes damaged by Hurricane Matthew.
Now this time because senior state leaders tried to alter a multi-million-dollar state contract to steer it towards 2 companies that didn't win the bid. Our investigative reporter Nick Ochsner is asking who's responsible for this decision to try to circumvent the process.
When the state awards a contract, companies submit bids that are then evaluated by a committee who objectively score each bid and use that score to determine who would do the best job. That's what happened earlier this year when the state put out a new contract for a company to administer millions of dollars in Hurricane Matthew relief funding. But we've now uncovered these emails that show some state leaders tried to alter the committee's recommendation and who would get the $15 million contract.
It's been nearly 2 years since Hurricane Matthew ripped across eastern North Carolina, leaving thousands without homes and main streets like this one in Fairbluff boarded up. More than $200 million in federal aid from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development awarded to North Carolina last year still sits virtually unused.
The frustration level for the citizens is to a boiling point. No answers, no relief. And we're asking for help.
State Representative Brendan Jones runs a business in Fairbluff and represents the tiny town in the North Carolina General Assembly.
Hey, everybody.
He blames Governor Roy Cooper and his administration for the slow response.
We can ride around and we can campaign, but we can't come down and help the citizens of the state. So it has to be purely politics now. The money's there. He refuses to help.
Now, documents uncovered by WBTV show efforts to award a new contract to a private company that would manage Hurricane Matthew recovery was slowed for months, because senior leaders at the Department of Emergency Management tried to alter paperwork to steer a $15 million contract to a group of companies instead of the one chosen by an evaluation committee. This is a memo written March 1st recommending the new contract be awarded to a company called IEM. It says the company should get the recovery contract because it scored the highest in the evaluation committee's impartial review of the bids. But here's another memo, written roughly 2 weeks later, recommending something totally different, saying the same committee recommends the contract be awarded to all 3 companies that bid.
I thought, as the Director of Emergency Management, that we could possibly take advantage of some of the contractors that we'd been using, and with the skill sets that they have and the capacity that they had. I found out that I didn't have that authority.
North Carolina Emergency Management Director Mike Sprayberry signed off on the altered memo from March 16th. The one that changed the committee's recommendation. There's no document showing the committee reconvened and changed its mind.
I wasn't familiar with the procurement and contracting rules.
Among the companies Sprayberry tried to award the contract to is a firm called ESP, which has managed the slow recovery process since the beginning. This draft document prepared by the evaluation committee says the company has had mixed results. and that ESP's bid for the new contract pointed to work accomplished and completed that the state disagrees with.
Did you read the draft comments from the evaluation committee that really found pretty pointed problems with the work that ESP was doing on the current contract?
I did.
Why would you think it's appropriate that they get awarded a second contract when clearly the evaluators thought that they shouldn't get a contract?
It was my decision. I made it.
The altered recommendation memo was attached to this email sent by Nick Burke, Sprayberry's deputy, which purports to have received the memo from 2 members of the evaluation committee. The contract, which was supposed to be awarded in February, was ultimately issued in mid-June to the same company that got the highest score back in March.
Should we have confidence in your agency's ability to contract for these services?
I think you should have confidence because we've got a team on board now that will assist us as we move forward with any type of contract. And we had a team on board before. It was my issue with not, taking it through the proper channels. But as you can see right there, I signed my name to it and I dated it.
Now, the state has recently received approval to start spending some of that HUD grant money in one of the counties hit hardest by Hurricane Matthew. Sprayberry says 3 other counties should expect that same approval sometime in August. Meanwhile, there is no timeline for the rest of the counties and communities, including Fair Bluff, as to when they'll start to see any of that federal HUD grant money. Guys, back to you.
Now, there's still no help in sight for thousands of North Carolina residents whose homes were destroyed in Hurricane Matthew nearly 2 years ago. Today, Governor Cooper toured towns hard hit by the storms, but he still couldn't tell our investigative reporter, Nick Oxner, when federal money meant to replace damaged homes would start flowing to some of the hardest hit communities.
About the only thing that's changed on Main Street in Fair Bluff is the color of the flags. Fading stars and stripes starting to match the color of the lifeless storefronts left abandoned nearly 2 years after a storm. But Monday afternoon, Governor Roy Cooper came with the promise of good news.
I know that people are waiting and want help, and I think people are ready to step up and provide that help to them.
His visit came the same day lawmakers in Raleigh wanted him to come explain why it's taken so long to get victims help. Instead, Cooper went to Fair Bluff. He toured a recently opened application center where residents can apply for help.
I'm here to make sure that things are working.
We're trying to do business up here for the people of North Carolina. If he wants to play politics and campaign, then they'll let him go do that.
House Majority Leader John Bell chairs the House Oversight Committee on Disaster Recovery. He had strong words for Cooper and his decision to skip Monday's meeting.
Our goal here is to make sure the money's accountable and gets to the victims of the storm.
For his part, Cooper said millions of dollars in federal block grant money could come to towns like Fair Bluff soon. But when pressed, Cooper couldn't say what soon actually means.
I know that as soon as the environmental review is done, that there is a lot of work that has already been done to get people relief as soon as possible.
But what's the timeline? Are we talking days, weeks, months? I mean, the folks have heard it's coming as soon as possible. A year ago, you said it's coming as soon as possible. So when can people expect to start seeing CDBG-DR money flowing to Columbus County?
They deserve relief as soon as possible.
But what does
and
that
I
mean
know that, well, they are working very hard to comply with all the federal regulations to do what they need to do so that the money can be distributed.
Reporting in Fair Bluff, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
Another WBTV investigation is getting results, this time for people whose lives were turned upside down by Hurricane Matthew and are still now waiting for help. Investigative reporter Nick Oxner has been digging into major delays in hurricane recovery for months, and today his reports caught the attention of lawmakers in Raleigh. Nick joins us live from the legislature with today's developments. Nick?
Yeah, Molly, that meeting today was of the Joint Commission on Government Operations of the House and Senate here in Raleigh. It's led by the leaders in both the House and the Senate here at the legislature, and specifically today they met to ask what has taken so long to help victims recover from Hurricane Matthew. The meeting comes after we uncovered the fact that zero of $200 million in federal HUD grant money had been spent to rebuild houses, and more recently that senior state leaders tried to alter a $15 million contract to administer those federal funds. Lawmakers said they wanted to know why the process had been so slow and what state leaders can do to avoid similar situations with other disasters in the future. Senate Republican leader Phil Berger and Governor Roy Cooper's Chief of Staff Christy Jones were both at the meeting.
Helping North Carolina recover and rebuild
has been the #1 priority of Governor Cooper's administration since he took office January 1st, 2017.
The folks in South Carolina are apparently light years ahead of us in terms of making sure their citizens are getting the relief that the state and the federal government has promised to them. Why isn't North Carolina?
Now, to compare North Carolina to South Carolina, like you just heard Senator Phil Berger say there, South Carolina announced this week more than 250 homes had been completed using the same money that North Carolina is just now starting to spend. At the end of today's hearing, they voted to establish a subcommittee to study the issue more deeply and figure out what North Carolina can change to be as fast as states like South Carolina when future disasters hit. For now, reporting live at the legislature in Raleigh, Nick Oxner, WBTV, on your side.
And as we track the threat of Hurricane Michael tonight, it was just 2 years ago today that Hurricane Matthew ripped up the East Coast, leaving parts of North Carolina in this video, as you can see, underwater for weeks.
And of course, Hurricane Florence did much of the same thing when it hit last month. Our investigative reporter Nick Oxner spent the weeks since Florence. He's been traveling across southeast North Carolina, hearing stories of those who've been hit hard by both storms. Nick joins us now. Nick, can it happen really 3 times, like lightning striking in the same place 3 times?
Well, certainly. And Paul, as you just said, it's already happened twice. One woman we talked with called it hell. Another woman I spoke with said it could be the end of her life as she knows it. And get this, in the tiny town of Fair Bluff, the 2 storms back to back could be the end of the town.
This was our ride down Main Street in Fair Bluff the Friday after Hurricane Florence.
This is downtown Fair Bluff.
Downtown Fair Bluff.
And we're on a boat because we're going through how much water right now?
I say right now we're in a good 7 to 8 foot of water.
If this seems familiar, it should. Fair Bluff looked pretty much the same after Hurricane Matthew came through 2 years earlier.
We're in a 21-foot boat on Main Street. I don't know what we're going to do.
When you heard that the storm was coming again, what was the first thought that went through your mind?
We hadn't repaired from the last one. We were going to do this all over again. We hadn't been made whole from the first storm.
State Representative Brendan Jones is critical of the state's efforts to recover from Hurricane Matthew.
You look at the town, no one was made whole. We failed the citizens by not helping them.
Can Fair Bluff survive this?
I doubt it. I don't see any way we can survive. There was no recovery the first time. We did not get the assistance that we pleaded for. I think we'll look at the community that used to be Fair Bluff.
What Matthew did, Florence just gave us the TKO, I'm afraid. We got the left hook from Matthew and the right cross from Florence.
Ray Lundy is a retired pastor who lives in Fair Bluff. We first talked to him a year ago when he was critical of the slow recovery efforts.
We need help. Are we going to get help? We need it. Nobody seems to care.
I mean, realistically, do you think there's going to be the town of Fair Bluff as it once was?
Not as it once was.
After visiting Fair Bluff, we caught up with Governor Roy Cooper as he toured the town of Pollocksville, closer to Newton.
Horrible. This is so horrible.
We've been all over eastern North Carolina like you have the last couple of weeks, and we're hearing from people who still hadn't recovered from Hurricane Matthew, hit again by Florence. If I'm those people, why should they trust that the state's going to come help them this time when they couldn't help them in Matthew?
Well, we put about $750 million out for Matthew. A lot of homes that were repaired or that people got built back in Matthew got hit again in Florence. I think now, with our Department of Emergency Management having built up a community development block grant disaster relief fund staff that it can put into action, with our commitment from FEMA, and with the fact that this storm is so widespread, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are going to need help.
Now, there's already some sign of progress at the state level. State officials tell me they've gained approvals to begin spending federal housing grants meant to repair homes damaged in Hurricane Matthew in 10 new counties just since the week Hurricane Florence hit. We'll continue monitoring to make sure those folks, like the ones in Fair Bluff, finally get the help they need. Guys, back to you.
All right, nice work, Nick. Thank you. This story is just one of our 3-part docuseries that Nick has put together. That series is streaming right now on the WBTV app, on Roku, and on Amazon Fire.